Hi, I'm Joe Quirk. Welcome to the Blue Frontiers podcast about seasteading, the environment, special economic zones, and innovation in science, technology, governance, and society itself. People can do almost everything better. That's why Blue Frontiers will provide innovators with sustainable, peaceful, floating islands based on voluntary cooperation and deploy them around the world to help communities adapt to sea level change and promote emergent and self-organized ways of living, free at sea. This is the Founders Series of the Blue Frontiers podcast. Today we have Randy Hencken, Managing Director and Co-Founder of Blue Frontiers. I've worked with Randy for more than 6 years, and I remember when the Floating Island Project was just a seed in his mind. He studied all the talents attracted to seasteading and conceived a pragmatic strategy for how it could work. In this podcast, Randy tells the story of all the previous seasteading attempts that were necessary to reach the point where we are now, after having signed with a national government to build the first seasteading. Now, here's your host, the Sea Evangeless, Nathalie Mezza-Garcia.
Hello, seasteaders. I'm here with Randy Hencken, co-founder and managing director of Blue Frontiers and managing director of the Seasteading Institute, which are the company and the non-profit that are building the Floating Island project, thanks to or after the signature of a memorandum of understanding with the French Polynesia government. How are you, Randy?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Nathalie.
No, thanks for being here.
Thanks for being our Sea Evangelist and making all these podcasts.
No, thanks for giving me really cool t-shirts. So, Randy, you were involved as the executive director of the Seasteading Institute for 5 to 6 years now.
That's right. I started in 2011, and within a year after that, I became the executive director. And I was the executive director up until the time we started Blue Frontiers. And for complicated legal reasons, I am now a managing director, not an executive director, as well as a managing director of Blue Frontiers.
Okay. So let's start from the basics here. What is seasteading?
Well, I hope that most people who are listening to this already know, but I'll give you my short answer to this. Seasteading is the plan to develop new communities, new cities, new nations at sea that float and are interchangeable and are modular and can grow organically and split up and allow people opportunities to explore new forms of society that cannot exist in land-based communities. One of the first things I ever did when I joined the Csun Institute, first as a communication director, was submit an email campaign. I ran an email campaign to the dictionary, to Webster's Dictionary, saying that seasteading should be a word. Wow. And I got an email back saying, well, thank you for this consideration, blah, blah, blah. And just this last year, I got another email saying that seasteading is officially a word in the Oxford English Dictionary now.
Wow. Yeah, I saw it. They even drew a very cute, beautiful seastead.
Okay.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the relation between the Seasteading Institute and Blue Frontiers?
Sure. So the Csun Institute is a nonprofit. It's based in the United States, but it has an international community of support. It was started in 2008. It's and it was under the vehicle of the Csun Institute that we were able to get to where we are today. And I think we're going to talk about this more in a moment. But after we signed the deal with the government of French Polynesia, we then started Blue Frontiers because we always have known that we would need a real company that could take investment to actually develop seasteads. That the amount of money that it's going to take to have this floating island project become a reality cannot be done on donations.
So a nonprofit can only accept donations.
Right. I mean, nonprofits, they can also sell things themselves, but when we're talking about the kind of money that this project will cost, which is many tens of millions of dollars, the reality of doing that without giving investment opportunities to people did not make sense.
The name Blue Frontiers, how was it chosen?
Well, it was chosen out of a long list of names and many hours of brainstorming and debate. And I will give the credit to our co-founder, Igor Ryzhikov, who was very creative and came up with this one. And we loved it because it captured two important things. One, blue, the oceans, and two, new, being a new frontier.
Yes.
So we liked it.
It also gave way to the cocktail.
It did give way to the cocktail. So also Igor Ryzhikov suggested during the first Seasteading gathering in Tahiti back in May that Blue Frontier should have its own cocktail when we were sitting at a bar one day, and it should be blue. So this past couple of months while we've been here in Tahiti, we've been experimenting with what that could be. And at our Tahitian holiday soiree that we held in Tahiti right before this podcast, we served mini Blue Frontiers, and I'll give out the secret recipe. It's vodka, mineral water, lime, and blue carousel.
Awesome. I had it. I like it.
You like it?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of the press articles, because there have been so many press articles, it's unbelievable. But some or most make a direct link with Peter Thiel, because Peter put a part of the initial funding. What is the link today with Peter Thiel? To which extent it's his involvement with the Seasteading Institute or with the Floating Island Project?
Mm-hmm. So Peter is brilliant, and he's involved in hundreds, if not thousands, of projects. And his role in these projects as a venture capitalist or a philanthropist is to get them started. He kickstarts things. So we're one of the many things that he could kickstart it. And as the story, what happened is Patri Friedman was writing a blog about seasteading for many years. And in 2008, a friend of Peter's invited Patri to come over for lunch and tell Peter about seasteading. And at that meeting, Peter said, "This is a great idea. I want you to pursue it." And he pulled out his checkbook and gave Patri a $500,000 check and said, "I want you to start a nonprofit and explore whether seasteading can be a reality or not." And Peter was one of the founding board members. So he's essentially is a co-founder of the Csun Institute. He's one of the founding board members. And he was actively involved over the first few years, but then his involvement became lessened in terms of his actual time that he was contributing. He continued to fund the Csun Institute through 2014, and he was very generous in letting us know that the year before is like I kickstart things. I've never expected to have a nonprofit just live off of me for ad infinitum. At one day you have to fly on your own. So he gave us plenty of warning. He was willing to match our donations that year. And what I was able to do was use the generosity that he had provided us by giving us numerous donations. It was about $1.5 million in total. But the very last year he also had a matching grant, and I maximized that matching grant and was able to stockpile our resources. And at the same time, when I first came on to the Seasteading Institute, there was about maybe 12 of us on the team that were paid.
Oui.
And over time, Patri, who was the executive director, and then this other gentleman, James Hogan, they had left to go explore an opportunity in Honduras with a Free City project. Another couple gentlemen left to go start Blue Seed, which we can talk about later, or I'll just tell you real quick. Blue Seed was a company that tried to develop a offshore, off the coast of Silicon Valley, a boat that would act as a seastead and would allow people without visas to work near Silicon Valley.
Awesome.
So the amount of staff started to step down right away, and I put us on a really slow burn. And it was in 2013 that I concluded that we couldn't just be cheerleaders for seasteading, that we had to make it happen ourselves. And I was able to leverage this money that Peter helped bring to us and run on a very efficient budget to get us to where we were in a situation to be able to sign the deal with the government of French Polynesia.
Wow. Wow. It's been 9 years since the Seasteading Institute was created, and you mentioned Blue Seed, but I know that there was another project part of the history called Klopstead. What is Klopstead? What was it? What happened with it?
So in the first iteration, so I've often thought of the Seasteading Institute going through 3 generations, and truthfully I'd put us on our 4th generation now. So in the first generation of seasteading, the goals were to do research and build a community. And the research was looking for how do you develop, independent nations at sea that are safe and comfortable and affordable. And if you're going to be out at sea, the best thing to be on is a semi-submersible rig. This is what they use for oil rigs, because these are built so that they're ballasted above the water and waves can go underneath them, and they can withstand major storms that way.
Yes.
So the Csun Institute hired a firm to develop plans for a semi-submersible rig that would be a hotel. And the idea was they could put the hotel off the coast of Southern California, and it would be the very first seastead. So they spent, considerable energy researching that, investing in it. But then I honestly don't know why they didn't push it forward after they did it. Okay. I will make a general guess. The general guess is there probably wasn't a market demand. The idea of it sounded great, but when push came to shove, the need to build it and pay for it was just more than they could find a market for it, and to get somebody to expend the kind of money and the investment it would take. I think that we look at it being about $250 million.
$250 million.
Yeah.
Because it's out there and it's too expensive in the open ocean.
Right. I mean, so to construct one alone is going to be like about $200 million to build it, and then you have to do operations of it, and you would have to anchor it, and you'd have to, maintain it. And oil rigs are made to last about 20 years before they have to come out of the sea, and they'll rust out, and so yeah.
Wow. I know also that you have a very close relation to Burning Man. You've been there 14 years now. And what some people don't know is that Burning Man has a similar on-water version called Ephemeral, which is next year expecting more or less 500 people. What is Ephemeral, and what is the connection to seasteading and to the Floating Island project?
So it's either 2009 or 2010 that Patri and the team at the Csun Institute decided that one of the first things they should do to encourage the future of seasteading is get people excited about seasteading by having a party. And that, if you had a good event, if you go to Burning Man, you don't want it to end. So maybe if you had a really good event at sea, you wouldn't want it to end. And the idea was to start small up in the Sacramento Delta, where it's river basically, and then eventually come out to the San Francisco Bay, and then eventually move out into the open ocean and have year-round events. So the first year they got together, they got a bunch of plywood and barrels, and they built floating platforms for a long weekend party, and they dressed up like pirates, and they had a great time. There was maybe 100-some people there. The next year, they wanted to do it in the San Francisco Bay on a barge, and they wanted to sell tickets, but they could not get any insurance company to sell them an insurance policy for a reasonable price that would make it so they could still sell tickets. And what happened at that point is the community said, we're having so much fun with this, we should just do it again. Let's go back up to Delta and do it again.
No one dressed up as Smurfs?
There's probably people dressed up as Smurfs there. Being that, it's a costume party and it's a lot of fun. And, so I went to my first one. It was the third year that they had it. And it's, a combination of houseboats and sailboats and people building land. And to this day, it's grown considerably, and they, people actually own a big giant barge that they've rebuilt. Wow. And there's different islands and different groups that get together, and every year it changes. So it implements some of these philosophies of seasteading, where if you didn't get along with your community last year, next year you can come together. And if you really, if your neighbors are bad on their sailboat, you can move your sailboat elsewhere.
Or if this year you have a kid and you have a baby, you don't want to be where the music is, you might go to your silent island.
Yeah, you get to go over to the quiet island, to the party island, exactly.
There was also a casino ship involved. It's part of the history of the Seasteading Institute.
Right.
What happened with the casino?
In 2012, a real estate company from Los Angeles had a casino ship that they weren't able to use, and they donated it to us, and we looked at it with wide eyes and thought, this is amazing. Look at this giant boat. It was down in Florida. We could totally turn this into the first seastead. We worked with a partner for a bit on trying to turn it into a boat that could be used as a seastead, and unfortunately that deal fell apart, and ultimately we were paying a monthly fee to store the ship and have the ship watched.
Okay.
And we were dealing with people who were liars and cheats down in Florida, and ultimately we ended up selling the ship to somebody that scrapped it. And it was a hard lesson, and something that you see, like a ship that's bigger than my house, and thinking there's no way that this thing can't be worth some money, and then in the end selling it for much less than my house is worth.
Okay.
And that. But it's a reality that seasteaders need to bear in mind, which is that the sea is an expensive place, right?
Yes.
And we get a lot of at the Csun Institute this idea of what we should start on cruise ships. Has been an idea that's gone around for a long time. Ships require a lot of maintenance, and it can be a great life for some people, but it's not just a simple, easy, we'll get a cruise ship. You have to have captains, you have to have flags for them, you have to maintain them. They run a lot of bunker fuel. They have to come out of the water and be cleaned. They're loud. If they're not moving, what they say in the shipping industry, if your ship's not moving, it's losing money. And basically, we inherited a ship that wasn't moving, so we were losing money on it.
So you came as an executive director of the Seasteading Institute in 2012.
That's correct.
And you made the practical decision of starting to focus on international waters and instead look to build a seastead on the protected waters of a host nation.
Correct.
What made you take that practical decision?
So there's a parallel movement that is going on called like the Charter City movement or the Startup Cities movement. And in these groups, the idea is get a host nation to give you a section of land. And in that land, you could import new rules. And I've watched this movement for a few years, and I saw how much difficulty they would have with getting this because people just have a big attachment to their land.
Yes.
And I, with great aspirations, believe maybe they would feel less attached to their waterways. It's an underused place, and we could build seasteads in a bay or an atoll or a lagoon. Without displacing anybody that happens to already live on the land. And I also took into account how expensive it is to go out into the open ocean. So it's just, even if you have a oil rig, and let's say that part is accomplished, you still need to get food supplies. You still need to get internet access. The satellites are possible, but it's not great. And just the supplying of a rig that's going to be, like, technically you'd have to be 12 miles out at sea, but maybe you have to be 24 miles off the country because it depends upon whether the country thinks you're violating their customs. And if you wanted to do anything that was underwater, it would be 200 miles or the continental shelf, whichever is longer, to be out of the exclusive economic zone. So it just made more sense for us to have our first foray into seasteading by taking a baby step. So that was my goal, was to make this a practical way to go forward. And we at that time we connected with our partners in the Netherlands. They had a company at the time called Delta Sync. Then they also started a company called Blue 21, and now they're members of Blue Frontiers. We had them do research on what a floating city called the Floating City Project that we launched. And they did research on the technical side of this. How would you do it, engineering-wise and environmentally sound, what it could cost. And then internally, we did a bunch of research legally, like which nations looked likely for us, what does the customer want. I did a bunch of interviews with people, did qualitative interviews, calling them up, say, what would you want to be on a seastead? And then I also, we did a online survey and collected data from that. And that survey still exists to this day. It's still collecting data.
Yeah,
but
it has
the last
thousands
time,
of people.
Yeah, lots of people, many thousands of people. And the last time we actually ran the data on it was still a couple years ago, but we're still collecting the data.
Wow. How does the search for a host nation look like?
Well, it's taking first we kind of did a survey of nations and tried to think what nations are most practical. So we were looking for a place that's small enough that you can get access to the government and talk to them, small enough that they would see the benefit. If they imagine
Yes.
like, trying to go to someplace as big as Mexico or the United States, and there's like, why do we need a little tiny floating island
Yeah.
with its own, like autonomous government happening? No, it doesn't interest us. We needed something that where the additional economy we would bring would be attractive to them. That okay, if you're going to add several millions of dollars into our budget each year, is that attractive, or at least into our economy?
Yes.
And then we need to be someplace that's not going to get destroyed by a hurricane,
Yes.
right? That's not going to get hurt by pirates.
Yes.
That's not going to have threat of other major violence because of the turmoil in the country. So after we narrowed that down, then we started reaching out to different countries, and this was a matter of just finding connections and like just pushing on these connections, and have a meeting with somebody and see if that would take you someplace. Have a meeting with somebody that would take you someplace. The highest we ever got, we did go into Honduras because they already had the program there that's for the Zetes. And we did spend a good amount of time thinking it was going to happen in Honduras, and unfortunately that fell apart. Fortunately, because fortunately we're here in French Polynesia having this interview instead, and I wish the best to all the people of Honduras. I think they could really use the Zete program, but being here compared to there, I feel much safer.
How does it feel different? This part of the history of the Seasteading Institute, where you are creating the floating island project. How does it feel different from Klopstead, from all the previous attempts? Why is this one evidently more successful than the previous ones didn't have?
Sure. I mean, this is I pinch myself every day, like this is a reality after spending so much time on it.
Yeah.
And they're going from fantasy to reality is really it's very pleasing, and it's a testament to being to not giving up.
Yes.
To having patience. To when people say bad things, not to let them get in the way.
Yes.
When it doesn't go the way you want it to, doesn't mean that it's never going to go the way you want it to. It's really also a testament to the support that the community has provided to the Csun Institute.
Yes.
If I was just alone with this idea, this wasn't my idea. This was Patri's idea. Joe's the one that wrote the book on this. I didn't wake up one day and say, I have a great idea. I want to build seasteads. I got invited into this project, and then I thought, and as soon as I was invited, I was like, this is awesome. I totally want to get involved. But, it's still something that I adopted. And, but knowing every day that I'm a steward of the money and the hopes and the vision, the wishes of these thousands of people who have supported the Seasteading Institute, made me want to press forward. It made me want to make it happen. So I feel like I'm not doing this for myself. Yeah. I'm doing this because I honestly believe that this will be better for the planet if this happens. It's better for humanity, and that we don't need everybody to believe us. We don't even need that many people to get started. There's only room for several hundred at first. But eventually room for thousands, and it was knowing that we had that backing is what made me want to keep pushing forward.
I know that right now you have 70 professionals dedicating with their time and knowledge every single day of their lives working to making the floating island project a reality. How does it feel?
I mean, it's great. It's so amazing. I mean, seasteading's really cool for the technology.
Yes.
It's really cool that we're going to build, sustainable floating islands that are going to be like all high tech and have Internet of Things and solar power and wave energy and all this stuff. But for me, it's always been the people. So I like the relationships that are built. I like our weekly meetings when I see all these people that show up and they're volunteering their time for it. I really liked the events that we've had, and people have come through and they get a chance to chit chat with each other. And the 70 professionals, that's what's happening at Blue Frontiers. There's also the dozens of emails a day we get of
Yes.
people saying, I want to be a resident, I want to be an investor, I want to come and bring my family or my life to participate in this project.
My technology, I can
Yeah,
contribute.
I've got the perfect technology for you. And then also, still at the Seasteading Institute, it's happening there too. There's still,
Yes.
many, many dozens of, volunteer ambassadors and people who are donating money to the Seasteading Institute. So, all of that, it feels good. It feels great to be part of such and seasteaders are brilliant people. They're brilliant people. We're just a little bit crazy, but we're mostly brilliant. It's the pioneering spirit of this group of people, and when you can get past, on the other side of the email and have a conversation with somebody, and when you get a chance to meet with them in person and you find out what drives them and why they're motivated and why they would be willing to pick up their life wherever they are around the world and transport themselves here to the middle of the ocean to help build a seastead, and then it's just this really great group of people to be involved with that should not be underestimated by any means.
Your wife posted a very beautiful message a few days ago about your persistence, all the lessons that she has learned from you in this year since you got involved with the Seasteading Institute, and how much emphasis you put on people. And I personally have felt it, so I thank you for that. It's been also it's great. It's really great to be part of. We are creating the future. You are creating the future, but at the same time, it's the present because, well, as you said, there's at least 70 people working every day to make it possible. Besides, there's the government. There's the thousands of people that have already contributed somehow. So it's definitely amazing. I know that this amazingness also, as you were saying, has a negative part. So what is the craziest thing that people have told you when you say that you are building floating islands? Because you must have received people who do not believe, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm pretty good about shaking off the negative stuff at this point.
Yes, that's one of the things your wife said.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we live in an era where media is bad.
Yes.
And media likes to regurgitate things. They write articles without taking the time to interview us.
Yes.
Even if they interview us, they misquote things. And once you're on the receiving end of media constantly, you see how bad media is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for free press and that there should be media, but it really needs to be taken with a grain of salt because I see how often they get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And because seasteading is never going to be detached from the names of Thiel and Friedman, we will always have a group of people who, because the world is polarized, see those two people, those two names, as negative.
Yeah.
So therefore, they will put all of us in a bucket, and then they will do a tribalism thing, mm-hmm. and want to demean us. And I think it's the saddest thing about humanity is tribalism. I don't think it benefits us. I understand where it comes from an evolutionary standpoint, but I think for humanity to advance, it would be sure nice if people became more emotionally mature and were able to get on the other side of tribalism. Now, in my own personal growth, having grown up a stalwart Democrat from a liberal family, and we would sit around the table and argue and hate on Republicans. So I was always in that Democrat tribe, I was in the blue tribe. And then when I joined the Csun Institute, it was the first time where I was in the purple tribe, right? This is where a lot of people from the liberty movement were involved, and I was outnumbered. And being exposed to people who once upon a time I othered, and I thought they're crazy, they're evil, how could they possibly believe this stuff? And then I would find out, oh, well, this is a really nice guy, and there's a lot of good reason to have this belief. This belief isn't any more crazy than this other belief right over here. So being able to be exposed to these different kinds of ideologies allowed me to not feel so attached to one ideology. Mm-hmm. And coming back to your question about people saying mean things to you. I think that it's just disappointing when somebody who, even if it's a stranger, one time there was a article that came out in, some newspaper, and somebody, took the time to write us a nasty email and wish that we would all, die and sink and whatever, right? So I took the extra time, after he sent me this nasty email, look him up and find out he's like some firefighter up in California, and he's just so busy assuming the worst of me and the worst of us because again the names of Thiel and Friedman are attached, and the media writes stories about billionaire evil people trying to make seasteads, whatever, right? So and I sent him a very passive aggressive email, wishing him the best and trying to make him see that on the other side of that email is a real person.
Yes.
And that real person probably isn't as far away from you as you think you are. So I probably care about 99% of the same things that guy cares about. So.
That is precisely what seasteading is about, right? About bridging and creating places where opportunities for different forms of being and thinking can be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, seasteading is about letting people flourish and let people try new things. And if we can be successful in creating floating islands that are interchangeable, that are affordable, that can be moved around, and life is long, but it's short. And if you have the time to go, experiment with something for a year and it doesn't work for you, and you want to move on.
How about the floating island project? So we talked about seasteading a lot. Now let's move one moment to the present. We are here in Tahiti, in French Polynesia, being marveled at how this project is becoming a reality. After the signature of the Memorandum of Understanding, there's been a lot going on, and we'll get there eventually. But I want us to talk first on what started to happen since you first knew that there was a possibility for creating the seastead, the first seastead in French Polynesia. How was that since September 2016 to now?
Sure. So we came to Tahiti. Mark Collins, one of my partners, reached out to us at the Csun Institute back in May of 2016, and we started exchanging emails. And I like to joke that we were on our first date, testing things out. And then eventually we said, Mark, this looks good. We'll come there if you can get the government to invite us, and we don't want to just come if it's just for a vacation. I mean, I'd love to do a vacation here, but it wouldn't make sense for the financing of it with the nonprofit's money. And Mark, being well connected here in Tahiti, was able to explain to President Fritsch why this would be good for his country. And President Fritsch sent us a letter and invited us to Tahiti. So we came with a delegation of 10, including Nikolai Germano and Igor Rizhikov, the others. There's 5 co-founders of Blue Frontiers. Mark, Nick, myself, Joe Quirk.
Igor.
And
Blue Frontiers. Cocktail,
right?
Igor.
Right, exactly. So Mark took us around on a tour. We explored Tahiti. We explored Raiatea. We went to Bora Bora. We went to Moorea. We met with a bunch of different influential people here. We went to the Gump Station and met with the researchers. We met with the Vice President Warfritsch at the time. We met with constructions companies. We were followed around by a Japanese film crew, and and the week culminated with the meeting with the presidency, and it just went really well. It was ended with the president saying this this would be good for his country, and you wanted to work with us. So then we all returned home with big smiles, and then we worked on this memorandum of understanding together, and we did several back and forths on that, which was an opportunity for both parties to better understand each other's needs, so they could understand what is it that people from the seasteading community want in order to launch a floating island project, and we could understand better what does the government need in order for us to come and be a part of it. And in that MOU, there were basically four major obligations. One was that we were going to do an environmental assessment. The other is that we were going to do an economic impact study. The third is that we would do the legal research for them to show them how they could create this special economic zone for us that we're calling a C zone. And lastly, that we promised that we're not going to take any taxpayer money to do it. This is something we fund ourselves. So then we launched the company. Well, actually, so in January, the government came to San Francisco. In San Francisco, we had an MOU signing, and at that point, we launched the company. We hired staff. We did our obligations in writing this environmental framework report. We hired out a company to do the economic impact study. We hired a law firm in France to do our legal research for us, and we're still committed to not taking any tax money. So,
which is a great point, and
yeah, I mean, it's
very different.
It's very different because most companies that, or projects that come to a place like Tahiti come and say, hey, we got a really big development we want to do, but we need you to fund it, right? And then you're just shuffling money from working people to the hands of developers, and we're saying, let's flip this around. This let's prove that we can do this on our own, with people that want to be invested in seasteading or that want to be invested in Blue Frontiers. Let's not go, take the government money to prove ourselves. And the other term to that is that we're also asking the government, to be a special economic zone. So, in other places in the world, it's, people will make us a special economic zone. We're not going to pay taxes, but we're going to use your taxes to make our zone. I mean, that's unfair, right? Yes. So we just want to be fair to we want to be honest and authentic with ourselves, and we want to be fair to the government we're working with and to the people around us. So we turned in our studies in this fall. They're now under review with the government, and we expect the legislative package to get passed in early 2018. We also, have done design concepts. We've had a small event here in Tahiti with a group of potential investors. We've had our staff house in Tahiti that a lot of people have cycled through. We've done a lot of community engagement here on the ground. Joe and I have toured the world this year, sharing the story and in preparing people to invest or become residents.
You did a conference in May.
We did the conference. We had a big conference here in May, exactly. So we brought about 100 people from around the world to participate, and that's where we got many of these volunteers from. About half of the people that came from the conference have stayed actively engaged as volunteers in the project.
Which says a lot about what you're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great place. It's a great place. It dawned on me since I've been here now for 2 months. I used to, a moment ago we said, when you did the research on the Flynn Island project, we got to find a place that's hurricane free. We got to find a place that could, have internet, et cetera, so forth. So when we look at Tahiti, you're like, well, Tahiti, unlike, they do have tropical storms. They don't get hit very often and not very hard. They got internet. They've got modern infrastructure. If you go into the major supermarket here, you'd think you're in France.
Yes.
Carrefour. Yeah, Carrefour. So they have they have a good supply chain. People that need jobs. It's a great place for all of those reasons.
Yes.
But there's something else about this place, and the real reason we're here, I think now, is that it's just the best place on the planet. Mm-hmm. They talk about the mana. The place has the energy, and coming to realize like what pulled us here. Like did we choose this place or did it choose us? How do you untangle how come now there's so many people from Blue Frontiers and Seasteading involved in this, and how come just when you go out, yesterday I spent the day on a va'a, which is the traditional canoe, just in the waters here. And the weekend before that I went out and did some jet skiing and went hanging out with pilot whales and dolphins. And then before that I was scuba diving with at a shark feeding opportunity. And there's just so much, and then of course the people that come over to our house and they participate in our workshops and that we've gotten to know and become friendly with and realize that this is just really an incredible place. Yes. And I think that we have a lot of opportunity for one another where the French Polynesians, they're smart people, they're loving people, they're forward-thinking people, but they're here in the middle of the ocean, and it's hard for them to have access to all the things that we have access to back in Silicon Valley or elsewhere in the world. And I think that the conduit that the Floating Island Project will have, that Blue Frontiers is going to have for Tahiti, is going to really be a good synergy with what they already have here.
Yes, I agree. You mentioned all the people that come here to the house, to the temporary Blue Frontiers headquarters in Tahiti. Last week there was a Bitcoin workshop where some of our friends came. Can you tell us a bit what we did?
Well, there's not many places in Tahiti, if any, that had Bitcoin before we showed up. So our friend Rob Viglione, who's one of the professionals that's working on the project and is the creator of Zencash, was here for one of our workshops we did this past fall. And it went well with him, even though it was a small group. And we said we could start hearing buzz. And what happened is, we're planning to do an ICO to raise funding for this project, and that got out, into the media and was the front cover of the local paper here.
Yes.
And so it was the first time the local paper did a full story about ICOs and Bitcoin and what that is. So we figured we should teach people about it. So we had a small group, about 8 people, that came over, and enough for a first pass for me, but we were able to teach them, what a blockchain is, what a Bitcoin is, how it works this way, what the future promises of it, and then we were able to help them download apps, and we gave them out some Dash and some Zcash and some Bitcoin.
There are some that are now now interested and want to do the second part of the workshop.
Yeah.
What's the plan with these workshops?
Oh, I've been paying my French teacher in Bitcoin here.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. She must be very excited.
Yeah, she's doubled her money so far in her
That's
classes,
really cool. What are the business opportunities for French Polynesia after the floating island is built and during its planning phase?
I mean, there's a lot of, when we're building an entire ecosystem, there's going to be an entire ecosystem of businesses around it.
Yes.
So, from the point of view of our economic impact study, it looked pretty like, just kind of at a raw study. They do these same studies all around the world. How many inputs and how many outputs do you have? You have to create this much infrastructure. How many jobs does that create in terms of construction? How many jobs are in a hotel? How many jobs are in a restaurant? I think that there's some that we just don't know yet, but between the partners that we're talking with and the people that I think will want to come and either be here full or part time, it's just going to have everything. And it'll have from people that want to do tech computer work, blockchain type stuff, to people who would rather or who are interested in ocean research.
Yes.
But there's also a lot of people that reach out to us and they say, I want to have the movie theater on the Seasteading. I want to have I want to be the barista. So I think just like any community, but I also think this will be a very exceptional community, as I said before. That the people that are going to be attracted to it are going to.
Usually the people who are attracted to Seasteading is because, as you said, they are at the most spearhead of cool tech. Cool tech and cool things.
Right.
Cool tech and cool thinking. How do you envision the growth of the Seasteading movements 50 years from now?
Well, I usually let Joe Quirk do that. Igor's pretty good at it too.
30 years from now. 10 years from now.
What I'd like to see 10 years from now is I'd like to see that this first project has been wildly successful and that we're well beyond 300 people. We're into thousands of people. We've, kind of filled up as much space as is reasonably possible without having a negative impact on the local, island here. Because eventually it could get too big. But, and then that and I'd like to know that we've been able to perfect our building opportunities. So we're not building, we're manufacturing.
Yes.
So that we're able to, at that point, produce these islands for, a tenth of the cost of the first one. I mean, don't take my word on that because you should still buy into the first one. Don't wait for generation 10. But that's what I'd like to see happen. And I'd like us then to be able to export the islands first to places here in Polynesia that are threatened by the rising seas that could use them, and then elsewhere in the South Pacific, the same thing, Kiribati and whatnot are losing land, and also of course the coastal nations, and I'd like to believe that we'll do more in the open ocean, at least in terms of energy harvesting and food harvesting. How soon we get to open ocean living, I think that it's still a hard one to tackle to be comfortable out there. But I'd like to see, it's already happening around the world with good food production in the open ocean.
Yes.
And one of the things that pains me the most is knowing that we, how much we just treat the oceans as a hunting grounds rather than, most, civilized societies are farming now, right? And I even think that farming is going to be replaced by non-kill foods that will be able to do lab-grown meats. But in the meantime, I think that caged fish in the open seas as opposed to caged fish in ponds is a better for the planet opportunity. I think that the seaweed thing is interesting and can be better for the planet. And then, of course, we do know that there's so much energy out in the ocean, and as we bring the cost down to harvest that energy, I think it'll be a good thing.
And you are working in that direction. I know that there have been a lot of discussions on whether to be connected to the shore or not, whether the seastead will have a backup resource of energy, whether to connect to the cable of the internet or look into satellites.
Well, I think it won't be a satellite in the near future, but it could be a laser or microwave that's aimed out at the seastead, so we don't have to run a cable back to shore. And that decision is, our preference is to not be tethered.
Yeah.
We'll see what the engineers can do with this. So I'm not the engineer.
But they are working on it. You have a cool, very, very, very smart people.
Yeah.
What would be your ideal seastead?
My ideal
Yours, personal.
Well, I would like to have a bedroom window that's an aquarium where the fish come and look at me. I'd like to get up in the morning and be around amazing people who will do some yoga with me, maybe go kite surfing.
Yes.
And then be able to have really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I'd like to see us employ the kind of governance we can within our framework that is novel and it's innovative, and if it doesn't work, we try something different the next year, so that we can continue to evolve that, and that we can then export these things that we succeed at to other places. I'd like for it to be very inclusive, so that just like this house has been, the Blue Frontiers headquarters this past month has had people come through from England, Japan, the Netherlands, Russia, Colombia. I'm sure I'm missing places.
Netherlands, Italy,
yeah. So just
Polynesia.
The worldliness of it, being exposed to different people, different ideas, I think is good for all of us. And and then I like to go, scuba diving frequently and surfing and enjoy a good life on a seastead.
Yes, when you were mentioning everything you did last week, from dolphins, whales, sharks, stingrays, it sounds almost unreal, but I can testify that it's true. It's not a lie. It does happen, and
I wish I was working less and doing more of that. Unfortunately, the office has been great. I have a great view from the couch I work at as I look out across the Pacific to the island of Moorea. But there's lots of emails to answer right now, and lots of planning to do. And I look forward to being on the other side of the project, to being able to relax.
No, I'm sure you'll get there. And thank you very, very much for being here.
Well, thank you, Nathalie, and thank you for all the work you're doing for Blue Frontiers and Seasteading, and you've been a great contribution to us. So we're really happy to have you out there, and really happy to have you explaining to the world what this is all about, because I think that you have a great talent for this. So thanks.
Oh, no, thank you for this amazing opportunity. It's a great project to be working on. It's really amazing, and it's real. It's real. I've just pinched Randy. Well, many hugs to everybody. Thank you very much, Randy, and
We'll talk again. This is probably just the first. So
absolutely.
we covered a lot in 45 minutes, but I'm sure that there's more for us to discuss.
We need to talk about the ICO.
Yeah, we'll have to do an ICO
Next
podcast.
one is the ICO.
All right.
Okay.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Blue Frontiers podcast. To learn more about our work and find out how you can support the project, visit blue-frontiers.com or visit our social channels. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Blue Frontiers, or shoot us a note via our website. If you learned something and enjoyed the show, tell a friend or leave us a positive review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our show and remember to join us for the next episode. See you next time.
Our closing tune was written by Metua Heimatari, Mata from Tahiti.